So today we're going to talk about the big picture. My name is Damodar Das. I'm a student of Bhakti Yoga and a consultant. So what is this big picture? It's a phrase you hear a lot nowadays, particularly in the corporate world. People are advised not just to look at the details, but to get the big picture. Not to be too troubled by a particular product or a policy, but to see it in the context of the larger strategy that the organization is pursuing. And you could say the same thing about our lives. I suppose it's like having the picture on the box of the jigsaw puzzle, trying to make sense of an individual piece without the bigger picture to connect it to. Might be actually quite a tricky thing, but as soon as you see it in the context of the larger picture, okay, this is where that fits. And many things in our life will fall into shape if we take that kind of approach. Every one of us has a worldview, a way of making sense of reality. Common worldviews include thinking that I am this body, that there's no particular purpose, the universe just came about through some fluke explosion, and we're in a meaningless interaction of atoms and so on. So if that is your big picture, if that is your worldview, your sense of reality, then it's hardly surprising that you'll pursue mundane goals pertaining to the satisfaction of the senses. We crave to possess something, we feel some inconvenience on account of something, and most people's lives, subconsciously, are chasing after the impulses of the senses on the basic presumption that this life is all in all, that there's no greater meaning, and so on. So this is one big picture that's very influential in terms of the short-term thinking that most people apply in their lives. By contrast, a completely other worldview would be that we're eternal souls, that there is a God to whom we're accountable, this is but one of many lives, and then we would pursue, from that perspective, from that worldview, that big picture, we would pursue the eternal benefits of the soul. Morality would mean a huge amount more. What the destination is at the time of death would mean a huge amount more. So we encourage people to carefully consider what is the big picture that I'm basing all of my decisions and daily actions on, and do I have a real grasp on the truth, or have I got some presumptions that are potentially just leading to short-termism, self-interest, and so on. You know, is it inherently better to have a big picture view or just to deal with the details? On the one hand, you could say there's an advantage just focusing on the details. There are people who are so big picture that they fail to take immediate action and do anything that's relevant in the here and now. For the most part, though, I'd say if you operate without a concept of the big picture and just down in the details, you'll regret that over time. You'll make decisions that are very short term, not with the entire context in mind, and you'll regret it. Whereas when you have the big picture, it allows you actually to be quite peaceful. So one of the ideas I thought I might talk about, there's a book called Bhagavad Gita. I particularly recommend Bhagavad Gita as it is, by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. There's a concept there in the 5th chapter that Srila Prabhupada refers to as the peace formula. So there's 3 understandings which are part of a big picture view of life that he says if you have these and you properly understand them, then you're never going to be disturbed. You'll always be at peace. One is that God is the proprietor. So many of the anxieties that we get into here are to possess something, to keep control of it, and so on. Sometimes we go to war with another nation over a piece of land. There's no basis for being in any kind of conflict with other people if we understand that God is actually the proprietor. Not only the proprietor, but the controller. So many conflicts arise because I'm trying to have you or some situation the way I want it to be for my own ends. Whereas if I actually understand that God is in control, and of course the third one really adds value to this, that God is our friend. He's actually the friend of all living entities. He doesn't take sides. We often hear the snickering of the atheists who talk about how each army going into war is being blessed, that God is on our side. Well, actually God's on everybody's side. And if we know that God has everyone's interests at heart, He's also in control, and He's also the owner, there's actually no reason for us to be in anxiety about anything. There's no reason for us to be disturbed about anything. We can be peacefully accepting of what's going on, and we can focus our energy on being pleasing to God as opposed to chasing after our own ambitions and desires and needs. So for instance, if I realize that I'm a soul, not just living this temporary bodily existence that I happen to be housed in at the moment, then I actually don't get too distressed or worked up or even overexcited about any circumstances which come to the material form. If I'm an eternal spirit, then I shouldn't get too worked up. A metaphor that could be useful is sometimes we might witness a young child drop their favourite toy and it breaks. And in the child's mind, without a larger perspective to think about these things, it goes into the deepest distress. Its whole world has fallen apart. How could my favourite toy be lost in this way? That's a total lack of perspective, and of course we might look on compassionately as the adults. It's understandable that a child with such a small frame of reference would get so worked up, but when we see it from the context of the entire life, I'm sure I had many toys that broke when I was 2 years old. I can't even remember those instances, but in that moment it was everything. And it's the same thing with any reversal in this life, whether it's an illness, some economic fortunes, a falling out with somebody. These are temporary things. It doesn't mean that we don't act on them, but the degree of disturbance is something that we can really minimize. One last story on the value of perspective. A great spiritual leader, Prabhupada, was sitting with some disciples in New York, and there was some controversy, and one of the disciples was getting worked up. And Prabhupada said, you know, of the totality of existence, 3/4 is the spiritual world and 1/4 is this material world. And in this material world there are billions of universes, countless universes, of which ours is actually quite a small one. And in this universe there are many different constellations and planets, and our little planetary system and our little Earth is just but one of those small places. And on the Earth, so much of it is covered with water, but there are a few different land masses, one of which is America. And in America there are many cities, many towns, hundreds of thousands of people, and one of those cities is New York City. New York City has hundreds and thousands of streets, but one of those streets is 26 Second Avenue. And even in 26 Second Avenue there are many rooms, and this is one of them. And here we are, and my disciple such and such is thinking I'm very important. So this is the value of perspective. We are small specks in a massive reality, and life would actually get a whole bunch easier for us if we can maintain that perspective throughout life.